And welcome everyone. And what we'll do is that we'll start just 1 minute past the hour, as usual, making sure that everybody's got their second or third cup of coffee before we crack on there. Usual housekeeping that we have is that if you want to post questions, you can do so in one of two ways, which you can post them anonymously in the Q&A chat, which is denoted by the two speech bubbles at the top of your screen, on the bottom of your screen, depending on you've got the toolbar, and then you can post any comments and feedbacks and dialogues with ourselves as the panelists, as well as your colleagues through the chat function, which is again displayed by the single speech bubble at within the toolbar there. We plan to speak for around about 40 minutes, but we welcome your poll questions, your feedback, your comments across the webinar, as well as answering your questions within the hour that we have today. We will be presenting this and sharing this with all webinar delegates and participants and registrants in terms of the slide deck, as well as the video that goes with this. So if you need to drop out slightly early, but we hope you'll hold on right to the bitter end of this as you hang off Stuart's and Adrian's words. So we'll be recording that if you have to drop off, and also sending around a PDF version of the slide deck with you there. So let's crack on. Thank you very much indeed for surviving Storm Babette. And let's see if we survive a Springbok storm at the weekend there on Saturday, as England go toe-to-toe in the Rugby World Cup. I had to make the mention there. Lots of diehard rugby nuts in our participants and in our webinars attendees there, shaking of the head. Adrian,
not going to happen.
There. Welcome indeed to this webinar, talking about embedding consumer duty into BAU activities. My name is Philip Allen, delighted to welcome Adrian Harvey, CEO of Elephants Don't Forget, alongside colleagues at Protiviti, Stuart O'Sullivan, Associate Director at Protiviti. Welcome, Stuart, to our webinar as well there.
Thank you.
And certainly digging into Stuart's deep knowledge of understanding of conduct and culture within firms, and seeing how we can progress and embed that through your firm with the time that we have together. As I said before, those people who've just joined us, jumped in there, we'll be making sure that we get this interactive session going with a number of poll questions that we'd love to get your feedback on and your responses to, as well as actually making sure that we answer many of your questions. If we can't answer your questions, we'll take those offline, if that's okay with panelists, and answer those directly to you after the webinar. Lots to talk about. I know if we can't cram it in, please do reach out to Adrian and Stuart after the webinar, and we'll give you their details so you can contact them directly there. A recording of this webinar will be posted to you alongside a PDF version of the slides. And we encourage you to sign up to all our news, all our gossip, and all our podcasts and webinars on consumer duty sooner rather than later. So these are the topics that we've signed up to. These are the topics that we want to cover off, talking about embedding consumer duty using people, processes, and technology, talking about how that can become more data-driven and how you can actually make sure that consumer duty is a priority in your organization from now on until, well, time immemorial. And then overcoming the barriers to consumer duty into BAU. We'll be digging into the weeds of where firms are struggling with and how to close those gaps that you may have identified in day two's activities, and then reviewing and implementing your plans as comparing to your peers. So we'll be talking about what's good, what could be improved, and perhaps pointing to some of the gaps and quick wins that you can adopt in your organizations that Stuart and Adrian were showing with their understanding of what good looks like in the sector there. So let's kick start off. I'll welcome panelists in a minute. Love to also get your feedback on what you're thinking at the moment and what's keeping you up at night. So first question that you should see on your screen there is a ranking question, which is, what activities are you prioritizing to embed consumer duty into BAU activities? What activities are you prioritizing to embed consumer duty into BAU? So 1 is the highest priority, 5 is the lowest. So number 1, outcome testing. And we're talking about outcome testing from reviewing and improving end-to-end customer journey. Number 2, culture and learning, fostering a culture where employees continually supported. Number 3, systems and controls, assessing whether new processes and controls are being executed. Number 4 is technology, exploring technology solutions to enable real-time monitoring. And number 5, MI and reporting, improving the quantity and the quality of data. And that's qualitative data as well as quantitative data there. So welcome, Adrian, welcome, Stuart, as people cogitate over their answers there. Where are things in the market, Adrian, to you first? Where do you get the sense check of where firms are in terms of like, obviously concluding day one activities by the 31st of July, but where are they now as they move into trying to embed consumer duty into BAU?
Hello, everyone. This poll resonates with what we have seen throughout this year, I think, Philip, on our webinars, and I'm still seeing firms talk about their concerns around MI and reporting. That would seem to me to be the aspect that has given firms the most or the greatest challenge. I think the thing that is perhaps disappointing is the extent to which firms are perhaps genuinely engaging on the culture journey. I think a lot of firms, I hear a lot of firms say, well, we've already got that, that's our culture already. And on that basis, you'd sort of wonder why the regulator passed that legislation.
Mm-hmm. And when you look at, Stuart, the poll results here, very interesting, isn't it? Number 1, MI and reporting. That is there. And second of all, and then prioritization, outcome testing. Culture and learning comes in a third. And yes, and systems and controls. Yes, sorry, haven't polished my glasses there. So feedback on that, is that what you're seeing with your clients then? Would you say that's where, you know, a sense check of where firms are?
Yeah, thanks, Philip. I think clearly there's been a lot of activity within the industry in the run-up to implementation. And we're now in that phase where everyone's reflecting on what's done, but the test now is how do we evidence the outcomes that we're delivering for our customers, and how do we evidence that they're good outcomes? So we are moving into that transition into BAU, and a lot of the conversations we're having is about where do we get to on our MI? Does it look right? I think, just echoing some of what Adrian said there has been a tendency, and we'll get into this as the webinar develops, but there has been a tendency just to almost reuse the existing conduct MI that organisations have. And I think that's some of that needs to be kind of rethought a little bit, and the FCA is challenging you to rethink that through understanding better the products and the services you've got, whether you're providing value to your customers, whether they understand the products and services that you're selling to them, and whether you're supporting them, you know, across their customer journeys. And that should be reflected in the MI, and the MI shouldn't just be a replication, it should be a rethink. But then the ongoing challenge is about the culture. So I would expect culture to be kind of the next big challenge for organisations, and how they make sure that through their people and their processes, that we really are thinking about good outcomes when we're engaging with our customers. But yeah, the results kind of resonate with what we're seeing in the market.
You're nodding frantically there, Adrian. Did you want to jump in?
I think before you can solve something, you got to accept you've got a problem. Yeah, and I think if we had another poll here that says how many people on this webinar believe that their culture is broadly in the right place, it's going to be over 50%. Just hazarding a guess. Yeah, which I'm not sure that that is a reflection of the regulator's belief. I don't know, Stuart, you're probably closer than me, but
yeah, and I think there is a good point there to kind of build on. So Nikhil Rathi, the chief exec of the FCA, said the other day in his Mansion House speech that Consumer duty is the most significant reform in decades. So the FCA are they're going all in on this one, is a good way to put it. I've been in the industry for 25 years. I was a regulator for a bit, and I've been a consultant for 18 years. I've never seen as much activity in the run-up to implementation from the regulator as I have with consumer duty. And clearly now that they are engaging with the industry, in August, September, we've seen some activity around the cash savings market. We've seen activity recently around exit fees for certain providers. We've seen them looking again at some platform firms. We've seen commitments that some general insurers have made to go back and look at past business. So there's some clear activity where the FCA is focusing on price and value to a large extent, but on business models as well. And that to me suggests that they're kind of saying you need to look afresh at your culture, and they're using consumer duty with this, which is going to be the stick that they're going to kind of have that conversation with the industry on.
Well, let's see what challenges you as firms are facing there. And if you would do, I'd like you to post into a chat either number 1, 2, 3, and 4, whether you're challenged by culture, governance, MI, or understanding. If that's where you think you are into like consumer duty understanding for the 1 and 2, MI and evidencing, 3, culture, and number 4, governance. Just get a sense check of where we think you are, so we can also move into focusing on that area for the remaining time that we've got with on the webinar there. So guys, if you could just see where other people are. Also, it's good to see whether you're an outlier. No one's put.
Can you think of a better way of displaying the data, Philip, rather than a stream?
Well, I just wanted to get people's fingers warmed up on this cold.
2.
There. So number 2, MI and evidencing there. Is it a question of not being able to grasp, Stuart, the MI that they want and being content with the MI that they have? Or is it just a struggle to be able to, tease out of your current data lakes, perhaps those questions that need to be answered but can't quite be answered at the moment? Where do you see that?
So I think most organisations have got a lot of MI already. It's now making sure that we're using the MI that we've got to be able to demonstrate whether we are delivering good or poor outcomes. And that's through both the product life cycle and through our customer journeys. There has, as I said already, there has been almost a complacency or a tendency to reuse what we've already got. But again, looking at some of the implementation activity which the regulator did, I don't know whether anyone on the call or some people will probably have looked at and viewed the webinars which the FCA did October, November time last year, when they were just rolling out their first expectations around consumer duty. And they, on each of those webinars, because they did them across 4 sectors, they produced almost a scatter graph of where they would expect a firm to be kind of plotting products. And it could be across usage data or whether we were selling the product to the right target market. But the granularity that's expected now on proving whether your product is going to the right customer in the right circumstance and whether they're using it according to how you expected them to use it. That level, I don't think is within many organisations at the moment. Typically, I'm seeing a lot of firms relying on a lot of the lag indicators they always have done, so complaints and claims, and there's reliance on things like customer service and customer experience data, but really getting into the granularity of as to whether we can segment our customer base in the data that we get, whether we're selling to the right segments in our customer base, whether we've got that vulnerability lens with our data. Really kind of rethinking the data is where firms need to get to now. Some are starting that, but I think there is a bit of a tendency to use what you've already got rather than rethink it.
Dangerous territory if you're not willing to rethink or evaluate it, Adrian, isn't it? I mean, leading and lagging indicators, that's your pet peeve at the moment, isn't it? You know, looking in the rearview mirror is not necessarily going to anticipate unforeseeable harm in that customer journey, is it?
No, I think this point about MI and data. So I think firms are inundated with data. I wonder how many of them can manipulate that data to become meaningful and credible management information, because it's the management information you need to drive the business and to evidence good customer outcomes. So I speak to a lot of firms who say we've got loads of data, and when you actually start exploring that data and how helpful that data is in the context of consumer duty, I think in a lot of instances it's inappropriate. Your rear view mirror point is really valid. Stuart's point about lead and lag indicators. Most firms find it very, very difficult to get lead indicators into their management information, just by the nature of what they're measuring. But we're going to cover some of this in terms of process and technology. I think if you're authentic about your desire to comply with the legislation, you need to get yourself some lead indicators. You absolutely must.
It starts off, we talked about people, process and technology, and according to management theory, Stuart, people do the work, processes make this work more efficient, and technology help people do the work and do their tasks to help automate the processes. It's simple, isn't it? You just get on with it, surely.
Yeah, it's kind of simple, but then people also make it complicated, don't they? And processes and organizations make it complicated. And I mean, this slide talks all about governance, and I think governance in respect of consumer duty is about having clarity on the message from the top. So at the heart of your Venn diagram here, you've got customer centricity. FCA expects you to put the customer at the heart of your strategy and ensure that when you're making decisions, you are considering the customer throughout those decisions that you make. Yes, you want to make profits, and there are commercial discussions to be had at a board level, but there needs to be the customer considered in those decisions. And I think another clever move, or another interesting move by the FCA with consumer duty, is to require firms or ask firms to have a board level consumer champion. Someone who should be non-exec, who is there the whole time as almost the conscience or the customer voice. And what we're seeing that's brilliant from a SMCR or strengthening the governance framework. It's not a requirement of SMCR to have that. It's more a consumer duty requirement. But it definitely calls out that, you know, at non-exec level, we are going to have that important challenge there. And there's a supplementary rule, or there's an additional rule now to the conduct rules, which kind of reinforce that. So I think, people do make it complicated, processes make it complicated, but it's quite a simple message from the regulator. You need to think about the customer from, top down. And if you're going to get this right culturally, that's where it starts from a governance perspective.
So we talk about strengthening the governance framework, Adrian. We talk about the ongoing obligations of the board, and we'll unpack that in a bit more detail with Stuart later. But at the heart of it is culture and the approach to culture. And when we talk about culture, we're really talking about people. But you've made the point in previous webinars that, sometimes people are the last people to be trained and to be supported to delivering those behaviours that the regulator expects, staff expect, also boards expect, as well as customers expect. Is there a disconnect between perhaps, supporting and learning and reviewing your approach to learning, as well as actually supporting a culture where everybody wants to drive towards, so that desire to drive towards a better and more improved culture?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's been overlooked is the extent to which firms have supported their front line, their first line of defense, their frontline employees, in ensuring that they have got the genuine competence to deal with these customer queries and conversations and ensure that the customer gets the right outcome. We had an article published in the HR Director recently that looked at a phenomenon we've seen over the last 18 months, where employees are leaving. Attrition in the first 180 days, in regulated firms in particular, is increasing to record levels. And one of the reasons, there are a number of reasons for this, is almost a perfect storm. In the sort of work that you've been doing with Stuart and co, firms have taken out, they've streamlined the customer experience, they've taken out the clutter, they've got some technology in place that adequately takes out what were deemed to be perhaps easily solved conversations. And what's left, therefore, is by default more complicated conversations. And in order to deal with those appropriately, employees need to be trained to a higher standard. And to add insult to injury, most of the firms on this webinar today are working hybrid, and 70% of your in-role competence comes from peer-to-peer learning. And in the old days, I'd sit next to Stuart because he knows all the answers, and I'd just ask him, Stuart, what do I do in this situation? Well, now I'm sat in my bedroom and Stuart's sat in his, and I can't ask him what the answers are. So I'm being, without being overly red top, I'm being bombarded with customer inquiries that are by default more complicated. The legislation's holding me to a higher account. I don't have the support that I historically had, and I can't do it. And I'm going to go. So attrition is rising. So one of the things that I see, that because actually all of this consumer duty stuff, once you've done the desk-based stuff, it comes down to a conversation between the customer and Adrian, or Philip, or Stuart, or whoever's serving that customer. That's where the rubber hits the road. And if we three individually are not competent and capable in our role, then the firm's going to fail. And that's the bit that I think a lot of firms have overlooked. This isn't about training. This is about in-role competence, and the two are very different, because we can tick a box and say training's occurred, tick. Now is Stuart competent in role? I'm not really sure about that, but we trained him, and that's where you're going to fail.
Yeah, and I think if I can pick up on that, Philip, I think there's an interesting observation I'd make there as well. With consumer duty, we've been asked to think about customer understanding and whether the customer understands the products and the services that that they're buying and we're selling to them. And there's been a lot of activity to review documentation, letters, communications that we send out to customers. And I've seen a lot of technology used and just reviews of those kind of letters, ongoing communications, to make sure that they are understandable by customers, that they're at the right average reading age, all that kind of good stuff to improve the quality of the communication. But we do have a customer these days that, I'm not sure about you and Adrian, but do you read the stuff that comes through your letterbox? Do you read the emails that come from your financial services provider? You don't tend to engage too much with the communications you get, do you? So actually customers are more used to kind of picking up the phone and speaking to people. And have we spent enough time as a part of consumer duty explaining to those people that are dealing with customers how their role has changed and what good outcomes mean in the context of their role? Because, yeah, I think a lot of times and energy has been spent on looking at comms and not too much at looking at our people side and what behaviours we want. And how we drive better behaviours. It's just an observation from a lot of the programs that we've looked at. It's been, let's look at the letters and the written comms and the emails, but we've almost bypassed the person that's dealing with the customer here.
I think it's completely appropriate, Stuart. Who's ever read the terms and conditions of their credit card? I did a lease on a vehicle as a private individual. There must have been 23 pages of terms and conditions.
Yeah.
I mean, really? Yeah. So, I mean, that's just a fail in my book, because no one is going to read that.
It's going to be difficult to embed the change that you want to create that customer-centric culture that you desire, if you're not challenging, improving, or changing the behaviours of staff and making them accountable and assessing whether they're competent in role, especially when the regulator, for a number of reasons, has actually asked and expected role-specific training. When it comes to looking at processes, Stuart, there's a lot of moving parts that firms have struggled with or are challenged still by across the product life cycle, as well as the customer journey here. How are firms getting on with that? And do they have an assessment and understanding what's going on at each stage of the life cycle and the customer journey?
So I think we're getting there, and a lot of the programs that we supported and that I've seen observed are tending to take this product lifecycle or customer journey approach. And I think you need to do that if you're going to embrace consumer duty. You need to look at the outcomes that you want to deliver across the product lifecycle. You need to look at the outcomes you want to deliver across the customer journey. And then what learning and development do we need, or how do we want our people to support those, and what do they need to understand about those product life cycles and customer journeys and the outcomes we expect there. And if you think of it in those terms, that's when you can start to break it down in how we're going to measure this in an effective way. Because you define if we take the product life cycle as a for instance, you would define who you want to sell to, who your target market is, and then you collect information based on whether you're selling to that target market. And whether the customer journey is efficient around that, whether we're doing our right fact finding and our sales process is correct, and whether the person that's executing that for us is doing it in the right way, and they understand what they should be doing, and they understand the product they're trying to sell. So yeah, you kind of need to take these, the life cycle, the journeys, the person, and apply your outcome focus and your outcome lens to that.
As we move into BAU activity, are firms struggling with replacing the workarounds that got them over the line at the 31st of July with more robust systems and processes to make this a frictionless customer journey? Nodding to things like behavioral biases, which firms are still having to get their head around, customer bias there. Is that where are the challenges and the pressure points where firms are really scratching their heads to actually say, how do I align this? How do I enhance these systems and processes? How do I basically fine tune those controls to make sure I'm actually not creating more friction, perhaps in the customer journey, and actually recognizing across the customer journey that I'm actually, considering and acknowledging target markets or target segments like vulnerable customers?
Yeah, and I think another key element of consumer duty is making sure that across the product lifecycle, across the customer journey, we are continuing to look at what outcomes we are delivering and whether they're delivering good or poor outcomes. And if poor outcomes are a result, are we continuously developing, continuously learning and improving either our products and our customer journeys? That stuff will evolve over time as we get the MI that shows the good and the poor outcomes, and as we make decisions. But again, I think this is another nod or another push, another nudge, to use your behavioural language, from the regulator to say we do need to continuously improve this. We do need to look at, if you look at some of the interventions they've already made on the cash savings market as a good for instance, we do need to understand that if base rate goes up, how quickly do we pass that on to our customers? And are we giving them the value that they should have? And there's been a few of those nudges across the market, as we've seen already, through things like the cash savings market, the pricing practices for GI being another good example. But all of this continuous improvement activity needs to be embedded into your processes. And root cause is moving from just being a complaints activity into being across, all of your customer journeys.
I mean, underpinning that, Adrian, is a need for staff to be able to speak up and speak out about the opportunity of being empowered across the product lifecycle and the customer journey to actually be able to say, and having the confidence, but also the training and understanding to know to say, well, actually, this is the customer's satisfied, but are we achieving a good outcome?
Yeah, I mean, there was a confidence and competence are different things, aren't they? There was a chap who was very confident. He didn't do very well against the Indians, did he? When he went out there, I'm not sure he was particularly competent. So I think that from our point of view, I think that firms have got I mean, candidly, they got the wrong approach. They're measuring the wrong thing in relation to their people. They're measuring the fact that an event has occurred. I've trained Philip, and Philip, therefore, they're making the assumption that Philip is competent. It is unlikely that he is. And I think firms should be continually assessing, because it is about this feedback loop. It's continual assessment. And I think firms should embrace a more modern KPI, and that modern KPI should be employee and role competence. And it should be continually assessed, and that feedback and that should feed risk registers and say, we're getting this wrong. It's very clear we're getting this wrong. Our people do not understand this. Yeah, as opposed to a more general customer approach that says, let's tick a box and make the assumption that people are competent, because and we have the evidence that they absolutely are not in a lot of cases.
Interesting to see where firms on this webinar are looking at process improvements. So again, because Adrian loves it so much, posting in the chat, I'm going to ask you to post in the chat where you think that you're making significant improvements, or areas where you think that improvements could be made in your systems approach. If you think that's MI and reporting, put a 1. If you think that's segmentation, perhaps a target audience, put a 2. Are you focusing on improvements in customer outcome testing? 3. And then 4 for systems and controls, and then 5 for data-driven continuous assessment there. Stuart, is there 1 or 2 areas that you think, oh gosh, clients of Protiviti are scratching their heads thinking that they need a bit more support and help with?
So I've seen a lot of activity around customer outcome testing and rethinking the way that we do that, taking QA, which has typically looked at process, and now using that to align with our product life cycles and our customer journeys, defining what the outcomes are, and having robust testing around that, which will include kind of asking the customer at some point whether they understood what happened to them through that customer journey, whether they understood the product, really being able to test and prove the outcomes that you're delivering. So there's a lot of large firms using the opportunity of Consumer Duty to look at their customer outcome testing. Yeah, so that's been a key focus area. I think number 2 on my list would probably be segmentation, because the reflections that I've got on the finalised guidance which the FCA published in 2021 on vulnerable customers is that a lot of firms looked at it and understood it, but didn't really do too much about it. And with Consumer Duty and the need to have better segmentation and understand who you're selling your products to and how you're delivering for each of your segments within your customer base, there seems to be an additional focus now on vulnerability. So we've almost had a bit of a refresh on vulnerable customers and understanding who they are within our target market, and getting the right data for those. So yeah, customer outcome testing and segmentation have been kind of the 2 focus areas, really.
Data-driven and continuous assessment, you talked about it earlier, Adrian. I get a sense that firms are more aware and more open to receiving data, not only from the current data set or data lakes, but also actually considering what others are doing in the marketplace. We'll go on to technology shortly there. But do you think there's a sideways shift as cultural improvements happen within the firms to consider, oh, hang on a second, leading indicators, there's something in this, but we're going to explore. So there's an appetite, much more so than perhaps 1 or 2 years ago, where it was a nice to have. Are firms now aligning themselves to a must-have activity, to looking at continuous assessment and real-time data?
Yes, well, there's a caveat here. It's a bit like relying on consumer feedback as one of your measures of good customer outcomes. only a certain percentage of your customers will ever fill in customer feedback. So it's an imperfect measure. So inevitably, I only get to talk to people probably who are interested in continual assessment. So yes, that is the caveat. But I mean, we're super busy, and I think a lot of firms, increasingly, I think firms are coming at it from a couple of points. I think compliance and governance professionals are looking at what they've done in relation to sort of a single point in time assessment approach, augmented by sort of QA activity, and saying that's not good enough. And then you've got CPO type individuals saying, we're not supporting our people, we need a better way. And it needs to be more authentic, it needs to be more genuine, it needs to be focused on actual competence rather than an event occurring. So there is a groundswell from different parties within a lot of firms saying we need to support our people better, and we need a better quality of more authentic evidence. So yeah, I'm seeing it a lot, but then back to the caveat, I'm only talking to people who've seen the light.
Yes, that's right. Technology is a key part of implementing and making sure that consumer duty goes into effectively and efficiently into BAU activities, Stuart. Yeah, we've listed 6 points where technology may be used and leveraged there. Where would you see that happening in firms you're working with? Where are they looking at actually making that seismic shift with the adoption of technology?
Sure. I'll probably answer the question that's in the chat on technology, if that's okay, Philip. So someone's asked, I'd be interested to know what technology is available in the market that we can use to meet consumer duty requirements. So if I just talk about a couple of those, and I'm not here to promote any forms of specific technology solutions, but we've seen some good product governance tools come to market. Typically, what I've seen with firms in the past, with clients in the past, is that our product governance is pretty much spreadsheet driven. We might get some MI from around the organization which tells us what our claim performance is and how many sales we got and what our sales competency looks like, or our QA scores on our sales. But there are some solutions now that bring that all into a consistent product lifecycle tool, which is good for ongoing reviews as well as kind of point of time pieces. I haven't seen anything quite yet which plugs on things like price and value to that, but there's definitely some good product governance tools in the market. From a consumer understanding perspective, there are, I think I referenced some of the, when I was talking about customer understanding before, there are tools out there which can review letters for you, look at average reading ages, suggest different forms of wording to simplify the wording, make it more clearer for customers. So technology helps you there kind of review a lot of communications in a short period of time. So doing more quicker is always a good use of technology. And there are some great data analytics tools out there in the market which you can use for voice and for kind of written analysis as well if you need to. And I'm sure there's some good L&D tools out there as well, Adrian, that you could use for technology.
Yes, I know. I am absolutely here to blatantly promote technology that can assist. But I noticed that Philip's already nudging us, to use the word of the day, nudging us through the presentation. Otherwise, we're taking too long, Stuart.
I like to nudge my kids to do their homework. Maybe that won't happen. But if they wrote an essay on behavioural economics, then I'll be rather impressed. So moving on quickly, segueing into how are you using new technology to comply with consumer duty regulations? Multiple choice answer this time. Are you using it for specific tools to provide solutions for different outcomes, designing new products and services, and improving existing ones to meet better consumer needs, demonstrating outcomes for customers, improving comms and understanding, and reviewing and improving culture and learning and development there. I think this is, I mean, I want to put it out there to both of you, is that can you achieve BAU and a successful implementation of consumer duty without technology?
Well, given
what's
that
that?
email and the internet is technology, and I would say we are in a technology age. So by default, no, you can't. Can you achieve that without specific technology to assist you? Yeah, I think it's horses for courses. I think there are probably some very small firms out there that can probably get away with a spreadsheet, but type approach. But I think once you get to a reasonable scale, you can't get your arms around it. And there's a host of brilliant technology designed specifically to deal with these issues. And in most instances, it's SaaS, it's secure, it's low cost, and and the regulator knows it exists. So, saying, "Oh, I didn't know we could do that." There's lots of technology out there.
I mean, and Stuart, that's part of your assurance framework, isn't it? It's got to be part of your assurance, the adoption and implementation of technology to support your QA activities. You're going to have to lean in and on technology to support you, especially when our feedback is that 58% of our audience would agree with you that improving comms and customer and consumer understanding is where it's at with technology. Second answer there being demonstrating outcomes for customers. That aligns to what you were saying just earlier on.
Yeah, indeed. I think a lot of people have used it to look at comms. Like I said before, if you want to do high volume in a shorter period of time than a human can, it's obviously going to help you. And there's a lot of BI tools now in place to help with kind of MI data reporting and aggregation of information we're getting. So yeah, I'm not surprised by the results at all.
Closing that gap is going to be increasingly important, isn't it? As the FCA asks for board reports and sense checks where you are on that implementation journey, Adrian, moving from where you are to where you need to be in terms of like achieving good outcomes. But it's not only about technology and the benefits of technology to give you MI and understanding. There is a real opportunity here. I'm not just trying to big up technology for the sake of technology's case, but perhaps identifying key markets and customer needs through the use of technology. So, for example, understanding through the front line or the first line and understanding where customers are struggling could be leveraging opportunities if staff are trained appropriately towards products and services that they could be signposted towards that may be more appropriate to their needs. And that's critical, isn't it, for organizations to be more sticky with the customer and also delivering good customer outcomes.
Yeah, and I think just respecting some of the attendees on this webinar, they will be wholly digital journey organizations. And the opportunity for customer interaction is perhaps deliberately ironed out of the customer journey. So just recognize that spectrum in the market. But in a lot of instances, in the vast majority of instances, companies are by default a company of people. And the actual customer experience, the truth, is usually defined when one person, a customer, has an interaction with another person, an employee. And I think that service, we're at an all-time low for customer service standards in the UK. So I think firms need to look to the outcome of good and fair customer service in this market and the role that development support and training of their employees plays in ensuring that outcome.
Stuart, competitive advantage through the adoption of technology, looking at the last bullet point here, focusing on perhaps underserved markets and perhaps key market or customer segmentations there could be used through or identified through the use of technology there. So it's not just a business cost or compliance cost. There are opportunities that could be eked out of adoption of technology.
Yeah, indeed. And understanding your customer base, as you say there, through understanding the customer segments. I think also we should remember that the regulator is data-driven now as well. So we need to understand the data because the FCA are going to be holding us to account against our data and also making decisions based on data we report to them. It's driving all of our behaviour at the moment.
we alluded to it earlier on in the webinar. We looked at MI and the importance of MI, not just sufficient to have data lakes and data pools there, but actually drawing out of that appropriate MI there. We've just put 8 key points and key indicators that you should really sense check your MI against. Adrian, do you want to pick up 1 out of, or 2 out of the 8 that we've got on screen there, where firms really have to zero in on and focus to make sure that they embed consumer duty into BAU activities?
5 and 6. So, management information for me, it's all very well telling me what's happened. In most instances, I probably already know. Yeah, I'm much more interested in what's ahead of me. Yeah, so I want real-time insights and I want it forward-looking. Yeah, so I want to be able to see what's coming down the road. Forward-facing risk radar. That for me, all of that. I'm not saying the rest is not important, but you asked me for 2. They're my top 2.
Yeah, Stuart.
I think flags concerns is an interesting one. I think typically our approach is to have something which is RAG rated, red, amber, green, and we kind of we're happy if we are within our tolerance in a certain area. We are now in an environment where it's a good or a poor outcome, which makes it a lot more of a binary decision. Should we be making decisions across whole customer segments? If it's ragged, I'd suggest you probably need to have a bit more granular understanding of the good and the poor outcomes, rather than just operate within tolerances. But I think they're all important.
And averages, Philip. I've got to get on my hobby horse here. I used to run a really big business, that supplied energy to the UK consumers, and averages are extremely dangerous.
Yeah,
because we've only got 10% of our customers facing detriment. Well, in that instance, it was 1.5 million people. So in terms of the scale of detriment, it's absolutely huge. So I think averages can be very dangerous. And a lot of MI does focus on averaging, or coalescing around the norm. And I think we really got to look beyond that simplistic approach if you're a big firm, particularly if you're a big firm, because in those outliers can be really large groups of customer.
Be interesting if an FCA looked at similar firms in similar markets and had MI and data which was robust, forward-looking, real time, and then they looked over at another firm who didn't have that, had lagging indicators and rearview mirror MI. You don't want to be an outlier on this, do you, Stuart?
No, definitely. And so that they've said, first thing they'll be doing is understanding through organisations what's changed as a result of consumer duty, and they're doing that already. Have you had a look at kind of your pricing practices? Have you had a look at your price and value? Have you had a look at your business model? The second thing they're going to be looking at is your outcomes data and your outcomes MI, and they'll be doing thematic work in early 24, so early next year. And they'll be looking at the board reports as well.
When we've suggested a number of areas, 8 areas in particular, that firms can take away and perhaps focusing on ask those difficult questions before the consumer duty champion is asking those same difficult questions. Best to ask it now of our panelists here, rather than be asked later on in your next ExCo meeting or senior management team meeting there. Do you want to pick out 1 or 2 areas that you think that firms should be looking at to make sure that it's like that stick of rock, that your name is embedded through every bite that you take from that stick of rock? Don't know how I can work that analogy any more than I have done already, but I'll try not to there. For you, Stuart, first of all, 1 to 8, where do firms need to kind of look at much more clearly and carefully as they look to embed it into BAU?
So I think they're kind of all important, but number 4 for me is kind of where you start, or it starts with the culture, and you need to clearly, we spoke about customer centricity earlier. Clearly within the strategy you need to be customer centric. Your vision, your values, your beliefs within an organisation need to be that we're here to serve our customer and do that in a way that's going to deliver good outcomes. From there, you can set out your the products and services, the way that you engage with them through your processes and your customer journeys, the way that you want your people to behave, and you can assess the organization. But I think it does very much start, if you're going to embed this and believe in this, it starts from kind of the cultural alignment within an organization.
Adrian, you can't have number 4 and
5.
You've gone with, okay, 5. Reason?
It's my hobby horse. Yeah, for too long. And the regulator's now on this in almost every communication they put. It's like one size fits all and tick box approach. It's inappropriate, and it fuels, to Stuart's point, it absolutely fuels culture. So if you treat regulation as something you've got to tick and get on with your work, that is not going to fuel a positive culture. So it is, for me, it's a reflection of a poor culture.
There's a good question that's come in. There's so much focus, Tracy says, on consumer duty for firms, but the customer awareness / comms aspect have been lacking. How is the FCA making or planning to make customers formally aware of the existence of these new regulations? Stuart, one for you.
So I'm not sure there's a consumer awareness program. The FCA will be, through their supervision approach, be telling us so they've clearly set expectations for firms in the run-up to implementation. They're already taking interventions within the cash savings market, the pricing practices on GI, the stuff they're doing in the investment platforms and exit fees markets. So some of those issues they've spelled out for firms in the run-up to consumer duty implementation through the series of portfolio sector letters that were sent out in February of this year. So a lot of the communication to the end consumer will be done via their supervision strategy and how they want firms to change and amend their products and services and the way that they approach things. So there won't be an overt customer communication program, but it'll be done via kind of the supervision.
In terms of like what the expectations of your former colleagues at the FCA are looking for, would they be kicking the tires on your controls, your processes and your systems, and also your assurance frameworks, as well as actually looking at your desired culture? Yeah, so looking at that distance travel from where you are to where you need to be there, and looking for tangible improvements, metrics to evidence that is. So it's the journey that you as a firm has taken. Not saying that you're going to get there or arrive, but looking at that systematic approach that you are not content with where you are, but you're continually improving. Is that where they are zeroing in on now?
Yeah, so I think I said earlier that the focus at the moment is on understanding, when they engage with firms, what's changed, and equally what hasn't changed as a result of consumer duty. Yeah. So tell me, why didn't you change this element of your price and value? And that's the stuff they're doing on cash savings market at the moment. And they're requiring firms to send in their value assessments. So it feels like a key focus area, the value assessments of firms. So that kind of, what have you changed, what haven't you changed? Then they'll move on to show us the evidence that you've got, and how do you monitor and measure the outcomes that you're delivering to your customers? And then the next question will be, so what have you changed as a result of the poor outcomes you're getting? But there is, they're taking very much a strategic business model approach to testing the industry and assessing the industry about some of the known harms that they've seen in the market in the past. They'll then look for the evidence. They won't go down the route of looking at your assurance activity, because within consumer duty, they've said second line and third line should be checking what you're doing on an ongoing basis. So if they want to go down that route, they go and speak to the second line or third line, or they'll have a look at the reporting you're doing. And they're very much approach it from a governance perspective. So let's go and speak to the consumer duty champion. Let's go and speak to the sponsors for consumer duty, or how do you embed this in the organization, and test the senior managers through those conversations. So yeah, it's kind of what's changed, what hasn't, and evidence it to me, show me, tell me kind of stuff.
That's it for me, Philip. It's the classic. It's a brilliant way of looking at it, Stuart. I think it's what are you doing differently? And you would expect, you could sit back and say, I'd expect them to be doing this, and this, do it differently. And if they're not, it's just like a red rag to a bull. It's just like, well, why aren't you doing it? What have you done? Why not? So for me, what's changed is just a litmus test. It's a very awkward question, I think, for a lot of firms.
Look, we want to support you, both organisation Protiviti with Stuart and Elephants Don't Forget with Adrian, to support you implement and also embed consumer duty into BAU. And to that end, we've got a number of tools and resources through our blogs and podcasts and webinars and articles on consumer duty that you can tick and indicate you're interested from both our organisations there. Obviously, looking at behavioural change and employee competency, please reach out and book a call with the team at Elephants Don't Forget. And if you want Protiviti to actually assess, review and improve customer outcomes there, please do indicate your interest by reaching out to Stuart directly there, and we'll pass on your details to Stuart there after the webinar there. Time for questions, an opportunity to pose in the few minutes that we've got left. I know it's very strange, Adrian, we've actually got time left to actually address people's questions. I had 7 more slides. Don't know what to do with them.
Yeah. I think Tony's posed a question that I think is quite interesting, and we've had a lot of conversations with firms in the supply chain, both above, up and down the supply chain, saying, what are my responsibilities here? Stuart, are you able? Can you see the question? Can you see Tony's question?
I think so. Yeah, it's just gone.
So guidance is framed for direct writers. Have you got any insight into practice in the intermediary market?
So without getting too into the detail, clearly the FCA want you now to look, when you're thinking about how your products are sold, at the end-to-end chain and where the responsibilities lie within that. And product value assessments should be done considering each of those elements of the value chain. So if you are an intermediary, what are you adding to the customer journey as part of your role? Do you understand the responsibilities? And are there information flows either side of you, if you're kind of midpoint, or if you're at the end? Are there information flows up and down the distribution chain around the outcomes that you're delivering for your customer? So it's about getting clarity on responsibilities and clarity on the outcomes that are being delivered.
Brilliant. Slides will be shared. We'll send this to everyone who's registered with a legitimate email address. You will get a copy of this, the slide deck and the webinar.
Brilliant. One question from anonymous attendee. There has been significant increase in the number of FCA Section 166s during September 23. Is there any view on whether these are consumer duty focused, Stuart?
So I did see some numbers on 166s for this year yesterday. I think I'm only going on the data that I saw, and I didn't analyse it in any detail. I think there was about 11. I didn't see what time periods they were over. So I'm not sure whether it is a consumer duty focus or not. I think that, so the FCA are clearly making direct interventions in the market.
Right.
166s are being used more where they don't have direct firm supervision. I wouldn't expect them to be using a 166 for consumer duty this early into implementation. I'd expect them at least a year out, but they are going direct with their concerns where they've got them. Look at cash savings, look at pricing in GI market, all of their interventions are direct at the moment.
How frequently should you assess value?
So it should be assessed on an ongoing basis, but it should be part of your regular review of that product as well. So you might have a product which is high risk, which you assess every 6 months or every 12 months. Value should be part of that, but it should be an ongoing assessment.
Brilliant. Any other questions before we close down and say thank you for that? Brilliant. Wow. Yes, slides, as Adrian said, and a webinar. The webinar recording will be provided to you in the next 24 hours there. We will obviously pass over details. So yeah, thank you, Robert. Yeah, thank you for that comment there. No, thank you very much for participating and attending on this webinar. And thank you, Stuart, for fronting up. And you've done well for the first time. Well done. On this.
Will you have me back?
Yeah. You've done very well with Philip as your host, Stuart. I got to say, it's a pleasure.
There's a T-shirt. I survived an early webinar. Brilliant. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.